And what did Chuck Schumer do in exchange for that? He declined it. They voted against it. And he said, no, instead, I want to add $1.5 trillion in new spending to a 7-week stopgap bill. And I want to, as you mentioned, we want to reinstate free health care to illegal aliens paid for by U.S. taxpayer dollars.
Joining me now with the latest on where these talks stand is the Speaker of the House, Congressman Mike Johnson. Mr. Speaker, great to have you this morning. Thanks so much for being here. What are you expecting? I know you have an important meeting at the White House tomorrow. Do you think you'll be able to avoid a shutdown?
Well, I certainly hope so. The purpose of the meeting is so that the president can assemble the 4 leaders, the 2 top leaders in both chambers, to come in and have this discussion. And I talked with him at length yesterday about this, and he's going to tell Chuck Schumer and Hakim Jeffries to stop playing political games. What's really important to point out here, Maria, I'm glad you mentioned the national debt. The statutes in federal law require Congress to do 12 separate appropriations bills every year. That's the only way to ensure stewardship of taxpayer funds, to spend less money and make government more responsible. The problem is, as you and I both know, and we've lamented before, Congress hasn't really worked that way in a long time. Typically, instead, what we have is a giant omnibus spending bill at the end of the year because the can is kicked down the road all the way to that point. We've been forcing the muscle memory back, Maria, and the good news is we are at great length, great effort. We've got Congress to work again. The House Appropriations Committee did great work. They did 12 separate appropriations bills through the committee. 3 were passed off the floor. 3 bills are passed off the Senate floor. They don't match exactly. So for the first time since 2019, we have an actual conference committee between the 2 chambers to work out the differences. All this is working very well, but we need more time because the end of the fiscal year is September 30th. So what do we do? Logically, we passed a continuing resolution, a simple, very clean, 24-page continuing resolution to keep the government open for 7 more weeks so the appropriators can finish that process. And what did Chuck Schumer do in exchange for that? He declined it. They voted against it. And he said, no, instead, I want to add $1.5 trillion in new spending to a 7-week stopgap bill. And I want to, as you mentioned, we want to reinstate free health care to illegal aliens paid for by U.S. taxpayer dollars. We want to claw back the $50 billion that we passed, Republicans passed, in our big, beautiful bill, the Working Families Tax Cuts, to provide for rural hospital and health care, and a laundry list of other partisan priorities. He knows it's a non-starter. He's trying to, quote, show a fight against Trump, and it makes absolutely no sense.
All the while, lawmakers left and right have been saying we've got to get back to pre-COVID spending. How do you get back to pre-COVID spending when you're bringing some of those subsidies that were issued during COVID emergency?
Well, we're not. I mean, the subsidies for Obamacare is an issue that would expire, that those would expire at the end of the year. There's plenty of time for us to hash all that out. I'm not in favor of that. I think it's a bad policy. But that's not an issue for right now. Right now, we just need a stopgap funding measure to keep the government open so we can have those debates. They're trying to equate the issues, and they're not being honest with the American people. There's one reason and one reason alone that Schumer and Jeffries are doing this. They're trying to show a fight. I think it's very important to point out there's no partisan provision in the CR. They have already voted for these exact levels of spending. We're just keeping the doors open, but they want to shut it. And you know what they're going to jeopardize? Troops pay, okay? They're going to jeopardize WIC funding, Women, Infants, and Children's Nutrition Program, FEMA services, telemedicine and telehealth, all the rest. They're going to jeopardize all that for a political stunt. And I just think it's reprehensible.
Well, I know that Russ Vought is drawing out the plans of who's essential and who isn't essential. How would you characterize the job cuts that will come in a government shutdown? And are those job cuts permanent?
Well, so Russ Vought has a challenge because he's the director of the Office of Management and Budget, and his job is to make very difficult decisions regarding personnel and the priorities of the government. If Chuck Schumer decides and Hakim Jeffries, Democrats, decide to shut the government down, he's responsible for determining which services are essential, which employees are essential. And that's a big task. It's a burden that can easily be avoided if the Democrats will just apply common sense and do the right thing. But if they force that, the results are going to be on them, not on Republicans. We don't want this. It's important to point out the president, Republicans in the Senate, Republicans in the House all agree that we should keep the government open and do the responsible thing. The Democrats are the ones trying to force this.
So what's your sense of how significant those job cuts would be?
Well, we'll have to see. I haven't seen all the specific plans yet.
Okay.
I know that the Office of Management and Budget's working really hard. But there are, priorities of the government that we would all agree with that I'm sure Chuck Schumer doesn't. So he's walking his own plank here that he's created. They've made that choice, and I think they're going to pay a political price for it.
I'm wondering if there is an action-forcing catalyst, which would be the November 1st Affordable Care Act open enrollment. So when you see the open enrollment, is that an opportunity for insurance companies to raise prices? And will that be used against the Republicans to say, well, look what's happening. Everybody's insurance is going up?
Well, look, it's not impossible for us to finish the job in October. That's the plan. Remember, having gotten 3 bills through the process, and they'll be finished through the conference committee shortly, so long as we keep working, then you just have 9 bills left. And our appropriators have rolled up their sleeves. They've worked heroically, frankly, this year. First 6 months of the congressional calendar this year was basically absorbed with getting our big bill done, the Working Families Tax Cut, and they had to have all hands on deck for that. But since that time, they've been working around the clock to get the job done. I'm very optimistic that we can beat the November deadline and get all this finalized and finished. And so a lot of those unanswered questions would be resolved. But we have to allow the appropriators to work in bipartisan fashion to do their job, and the only way to do that is keep the government open. And that's the big issue, the big question that Chuck Schumer has to answer. Leader Thune in the Senate is going to put the House bill, the CR, on the floor again, Monday, probably Tuesday. And Chuck Schumer will have to vote it down each time, and he'll have to give some explanation to the people why he's doing it. There's no logical reason to do so.
Well, it's incredible to me to look at this situation where there's no reason to do it, and yet they're going to fight Trump anyway. We're still in this point where the Democrats just want to appear tough, like they're going against anything President Trump wants.
Exactly. And they're defying logic to do it. I mean, that's the whole point. Chuck Schumer got in a lot of political trouble because the radical left base in the Democrat Party accused him of going along with Republicans. What Chuck Schumer was doing in March when he agreed to the government funding resolution was the responsible thing. He needs to do that again. This is the exact same scenario. He has to do the right thing. He is making a very selfish decision here. He's trying to give himself temporary political cover. The problem is he's painted himself in a corner. There's nowhere to go. And I just think it's shameful that they're playing politics with all the services that the American people demand and deserve. They're going to be stopped. Troops, think of it. Troops won't be paid because Chuck Schumer needs political cover. I mean, it's really that simple. And I think everybody's going to see that clearly.
Wow. All right, Mr. Speaker, we'll be watching your work and the meeting tomorrow, what comes out of it. Thanks so much for walking us through it. Good to see you, sir.
If you enjoy this content, please consider subscribing to my channel to stay up to date with future videos. Thank you for watching.